I'll be very brief, and I want to thank both the majority and the minority for accepting this amendment. Mr. Chairman, as we attempt to make higher education more affordable and more accessible for the middle income and working families of our country, we need, in fact, to do a much better job in controlling the escalating cost of a college education. The cost of a college degree for many institutions in this country today is truly shocking. According to the National Commission on the Cost of Higher Education, and I quote, "In the 20 years between 1976 and 1996, the average tuition at public universities increased from $642 to $3,151, and the average tuition at private universities increased from $2,881 to $15,581, end quote. And tuitions at public two-year colleges, the least expensive of all types of institutions, they have increased 5 times over. So it seems to me, while we do all that we can to increase federal aid for those middle-income and working families that need a college education, we are doing relatively little, I think, to hold down the costs of college. In fact, the #1 recommendation of the National Commission on the Cost of Higher Education is to strengthen institutional cost control. That is their #1 recommendation. Mr. Chairman, I have the very simple amendment that I am offering would help institutions in some ways to reduce their costs and hopefully allow them to use those savings to lower the cost of tuition and college fees. In the state of Vermont, where my wife has served as the provost of a small college and has been involved in this area, and in many other regions of the country, colleges are beginning to come together to form partnerships or consortia that enables them to share resources and reduce their collective costs. For example, in some cases, significant cost savings can be realized by bulk purchasing of goods and services. When schools come together to purchase things like fuel, in the state of Vermont, fuel is an expensive cost, or insurance, if they pool their resources, they can save money and use those savings to lower the cost of tuition. The problem right now, however, is that many hard-pressed schools, many of the smaller schools, simply do not have the resources or the available technical expertise to figure out how they can do those things and how they can work with other colleges to reduce costs. This amendment, which would add no additional cost to any of the higher education programs, would instead give the Fund for the Improvement of Post-Secondary Education, which administers a competitive grant program for higher education institutions, a broader mission and allow them to make competitive grants available to institutions which seek to cooperate and reduce costs through the joint purchase of goods and services. Mr. Chairman, this amendment is consistent with the National Commission on the Cost of Higher Education, which recommends, and I quote, "greater institutional and regional cooperation in using existing facilities and institutions of higher education," end quote. And that's what this amendment does, and I thank both the majority and the minority for accepting this amendment, and I would yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back the balance of his time.